Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Aina and I am an oncology pharmacist. Today I'm going to react to a highly requested video that just from reading the title, I already know the video is going to be insane. It's from the Emporium. I genetically engineered myself to fix lactose intolerance. I've never come across his channel before, but it looks like he does science and engineering videos, so this will be the first time I'm watching anything from his videos. Alright, here goes.
I've spent the last probably a little over a couple of weeks at this point, growing a virus that codes for a functional copy of the lactase enzyme, because I am very lactose intolerant.
What? You can do that? That is too cool to be true. The uncool way is to buy Lactaid, the lactase enzyme, in a pill and take that every time before you need to eat dairy. This is the final product. I had to package it into 3 pills because that was what I could get the microcrystalline cellulose to fit into. It's kind of damp. I'm a little worried because I am allergic to penicillin, and we use penicillin in media. Okay. So I've got some Benadryl, so I'm going to take 2 of these. Okay, he's allergic to penicillin, and he said he used penicillin in media. I'm not sure how exactly he's using penicillin, but I'm sure we'll find out. Depending on the severity, some people's allergy to penicillin just has a little bit of a rash on their body, and that can easily go away with taking Benadryl, which is called diphenhydramine. But some people actually have a life-threatening reaction called an anaphylactic reaction to penicillin, which is when they get shortness of breath, they can get swelling of their tongue and their airways, they can't breathe, and basically they could die from the reaction. And to save them, we would give them epinephrine, which comes in EpiPen, and then they would need to be sent to the hospital. So hopefully he just has a mild allergy to penicillin. Actually, we use Benadryl all the time as pre-meds before we give patients chemotherapy, just because chemotherapy tend to cause a lot of reactions in people. So just to prevent them suffering through the reaction and then giving them a drug, we just give them preventative drugs like Benadryl.
And then all of these, and the idea is these will open up in my stomach, release the virus, and then the virus will go into my intestinal lining and give me a functional copy of the lactase enzyme. And then here goes. Well, bottoms up.
I'm so amazed how he figured out all the steps it takes for this pill to go through the human body. Like how the capsule has to open or get dissolved, and then the virus is gonna first get released into the stomach and has to survive the super acidic environment of the stomach acid. Then it passes to the small intestine, and there it needs to get absorbed. And then the virus would have to infect the right cell, I'm guessing, to make the copies of the gene. It just seems like so many steps have to go right. And this whole process is actually its own study called pharmacology. It's like a real subject. I thought this would be something that takes a whole research team to develop. How is he doing this on his own? I can't wait to find out.
When I was 15, I started getting sick all the time. At first it was pretty infrequent, but I remember the day that it started. I didn't know at the time that I'd suddenly become lactose intolerant, so all the food I was eating was hurting me. Laugh it off, but in my case it wasn't just a bit of gas. I was getting violently ill if I ate even a minute amount of lactose, and symptoms would start in less than an hour. And I'm not alone, this happens to up to 65% of the human population. At some point, your ability to eat milk just vanishes and you start getting sick.
So when we were babies, our digestive systems are designed to digest breast milk. In order to digest the breast milk, we produce something called lactase. It's an enzyme to break down the sugar found in milk products called lactose. But when we're no longer babies, we stop drinking the breast milk, and then our digestive system slowly evolves to digesting other foods. But when this happens, some people might stop producing enough of the lactase enzyme to digest the lactose found in milk. And this is what makes some people lactose intolerant. I'm not sure if the statistics of 65% of people having lactose intolerance is true or not, but it's definitely more common in Asians compared to Caucasians. This is probably mostly genetic, and there's overall not that much dairy use in Asian foods, so over time, people just stop producing enough lactase.
Most people don't actually think about how much lactose is in the food we eat. As a society, we actually produce so much milk for use in cheese making that it's literally a waste product. So all of the components are separated out and used and resold for a variety of purposes. The sugars, specifically lactose, are refined and used as filler and flavor in an enormous amount of products. Most pharmaceutical manufacturers use it to bulk up drugs used to make pills, so that the tiny amount of drug that they need to carry can be pressed into a comparatively large pill.
Yeah, actually one of the most common questions I get asked as a pharmacist is if a patient is lactose intolerant, we need to find them an alternative for a drug. Thank goodness most of the time for a certain drug, different brands will use different ingredients. So some brands will use lactose as a filler, some brands won't. So the patient can just be switched to a different brand. But there are times that all the brands available for a certain drug contain lactose. So a lot of the times we'll have to find a different drug for a patient.
When I was asked if I was going into biology to end world hunger or some other grand gesture, my response has always been, no dude, I just want to eat pizza again and not need to check every label on everything. And I can happily say that that day is finally here. After 6 years, I finally have access to the tools and know-how to build a permanent treatment that should restore my lactose tolerance and fix this once and for all.
So if you're also lactose intolerant but you don't have the resources or knowledge on how to genetically engineer yourself, don't worry. I have a solution for you. It's called taking Lactaid every time before you take dairy products. I've never had these before because I'm luckily not lactose intolerant, but I heard these taste pretty good. They're vanilla flavored. That's what the pills look like. Hopefully you can see that. And the instruction is to swallow or chew 2 tablets just before eating. A maximum of 4 tablets at any one time should prevent the symptoms of lactose intolerance. Now, this isn't a permanent solution, and I can think of 3 problems with taking Lactaid. First is you have to take it every time before you take dairy. Second, it's not 100% foolproof because you could accidentally eat a type of food without realizing there's dairy product in it. And third, it's not the most convenient because you literally have to carry it around with you all the time. But it does do the job.
Before we get into the lab and get working, let's go over how this is going to work. First, we need to understand both lactose and the enzyme that breaks it down. Lactose is a disaccharide, or simple sugar that has 2 subunits, one glucose and one galactose subunit.
Yep, so the common sugars that are found are obviously lactose, which is found in dairy products, fructose, which is found in natural fruits or fruit juices. Sucrose is also a disaccharide that's combining glucose and fructose, and it's found in sugarcane. It's also what's put in table sugar, but all of these different types of sugar eventually gets converted into glucose, which is our body's energy source.
If you don't produce the lactase enzyme, the sugar will make it all the way through your small intestine and into your colon. Your colon is full of a lot more bacteria, especially gas-producing bacteria, and so they feed on the influx of extra available food because the lactose wasn't broken down and absorbed.
Okay, that was a lot of good information, but basically what he's saying is that the undigested lactose, if they make it all the way down to your large intestine, which is what we call the colon, then it will actually draw a lot of water there and make a lot of gas, so you get the symptoms of gassiness and diarrhea.
We could use the human gene for lactase, but it's actually standard practice to use a lactase enzyme from E. coli called LacZ. LacZ is used all throughout biology and in combination with a color-changing dye, can be used as a marker to indicate if cells are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
In the medical field, when we see E. coli, it just means bad because a lot of the common infections come from E. coli, like traveler's diarrhea, urinary tract infections.
When I was looking into this, I found a paper that uses a special virus to deliver a working copy of LacZ to the intestinal tract of rats. A week after the researchers applied the virus, they challenged 2 sets of rats that had previously been completely lactose intolerant with a lactose-only diet. The rats that had been given the virus maintained their weight and their blood glucose levels went up after they ate the lactose, indicating that they had started to produce the lactase enzyme and was able to use it for calories.
So what he's doing here basically is turning an animal study into a phase 1 human clinical trial with N=1.
The virus they used is called an AAV, or adeno-associated virus. This virus is the gold standard for gene therapy because of its reliability and long history of safety. The wild virus can be found in almost everyone and in most tissue samples that have ever been tested, so it's extremely common. But it doesn't cause any sort of illness, it just kind of hangs out.
I didn't know that we all had this virus.
So how do you make the virus, and how do you choose what DNA ends up on the inside? Well, it all works on a very clever system. To make a virus particle, you need all the sequences of DNA that code for all the proteins that make the shell of the virus to be transcribed in the same cell. The various pieces will float around until they bump into the rest of the pieces, and then they sort of snap together to form the virus particle. Normally, this would mean that the virus packages DNA that contains all of the information to make all of its own pieces. But what biologists did is break their DNA into 3 separate pieces. The first 2 contain all the sequences to make all of the proteins, but lack the ITR sequences. That's how you can put this DNA into bacteria and use them as tiny copying machines to make a literal bucket worth of DNA to be used in future experiments. The last plasmid is where all of the important parts are.
That's where the LacZ is, isn't it?
Then right after it, we have the LacZ gene that we want, and finally something called a poly-A signal. This is just a part that's necessary for when the protein is actually being made.
But how would they code these specific genes on the plasmids? I guess that's done through something similar to gene sequencing, and they can actually pick and choose the gene they want and make that into a plasmid. That's actually so cool. I don't think I've ever seen a video where someone explains this in such detail, but I feel like I need to watch this video at least a couple more times to be able to understand all the information.
Okay, now that we know how this works, let's get to work. I'm here in my friend's genetics lab, and he's letting me use his equipment and materials so I can do this project.
Nice.
For this, we'll need a few things. First is the 3 pieces of DNA. The 2 virus plasmids come as a kit, and I bought the Lactose plasmid separately.
So I guess we won't be seeing how the gene is actually coded on the plasmid because I didn't know you can just buy them.
We'll be using 2 kinds of cells, HEK, or human embryonic kidney, and CHO, or Chinese hamster ovary.
Ooh, I've heard of Chinese hamster ovary cells before, and they use that to actually make a lot of cancer drugs, especially immunotherapy. The only reason why I've heard of them is because I had a patient who was allergic to one type of immune therapy, and then we were switching her to a different type of immune therapy. But as I was checking for the drug interaction, it showed that both of these immune therapies were developed in Chinese hamster ovary cells. And me and the doctor kind of had to talk about how likely it is that she's going to be allergic to this new type of immunotherapy as well, just because both of them were made from Chinese hamster ovary cells. And we decided that her reaction is probably from the old immune therapy itself and what it did to her body, instead of a cross reaction based on where the drug was made. And it turns out she wasn't allergic to the second immunotherapy.
First things first, we need to start some cells. All of our work will be taking place in a Biosafety 2 laminar flow hood. This keeps everything super sterile and prevents our cells from getting contaminated or other viruses getting in.
Wow, that's exactly the same type of biosafety cabinet that we use when we mix IV chemotherapy drugs for patients. I talked about that in my last reaction video to Now Red, so if you're interested, you can check that out here.
Also, we use antibiotics in the media to further limit contamination. Specifically, we use a mixture of penicillin and streptomycin. Before entering the hood, spray down the surface with alcohol, put on gloves, and then spray your arms up to the elbow with the alcohol. Before bringing any materials into the hood, they must be sterile and the container needs to be sprayed with alcohol.
Nice, that's really good practice. We actually have a few more steps when we prepare IV chemotherapy drugs, but that's expected because we're preparing drugs that's going through IV into a patient's vein, and they're preparing drugs that are to be taken orally. So for us to even enter the sterile compounding room, we need to put on a ton of gear. 2 pairs of chemotherapy gloves, so that means they've been tested against chemotherapy liquids. 2 pairs of shoe covers, hair cover, mask, chemotherapy gown. If you're a guy and you have beard, you have to wear a beard cover. And yeah, everything needs to be wiped down before it can enter the hood.
To move the media around, we're using special serological pipettes that have a wide opening and come pre-sterilized and individually wrapped. We're also using an autopipetter that makes it easy to draw and release liquids. We'll be growing our cells in a special tissue culture flask that comes pre-sterilized. In this case, we'll be using a small 25cm flask that holds a maximum of 5 milliliters of liquid.
This is super fascinating to watch because I've actually never done hands-on biology experiments like this, and I feel like the stakes in this is super high. Like, this guy will actually need to take the pills at the end, so they better get it right.
And that's most of it done. All that's left is to package this into a pill. To do that, I mix the solution with a minimal amount of microcrystalline cellulose, and then put that into gel caps using this handy gel cap jig machine thing.
Microcrystalline cellulose is so commonly seen in pills. It's just used as a bulking agent to pack the active ingredient in the pill, so you get this nice pharmaceutically elegant product.
Well, bottoms up.
Oh, he took it! Oh my god, I'm even kind of nervous for him.
After taking the pills, I waited 3 days to give the virus time to deliver the DNA and give my cells time to start producing lactase. And then it was time to test it. We ordered the milkiest, cheesiest pizza we could.
Ranch dressing, barbecue sauce, chicken poppers, mozzarella cheese.
Oh, that looks so good.
If this doesn't hurt him, nothing will.
Try to be less scared.
Fear is the mind killer.
Wait, did his friend just say fear is the mind killer? I thought I was the only person making Dune references in my videos. It's like that scene in Dune, a lot of potions to treat balding. This is giving me 10 out of 10 Arrakis vibes.
You're the bravest scientist.
Yeah. Is it good?
It is. It is real good.
Actually, this reminds me of the scientist that discovered H. pylori, which is a bacteria that causes a few different severe stomach diseases, and he tested it on himself as well. The guy was called Barry James Marshall, and he was a doctor, and in 1984, he was unsuccessful in developing an animal model for the H. pylori, so he just drank a cup of the bacteria himself. And then 3 days later, he started getting symptoms like nausea and stomach pain. But this self-sacrifice proved to be really rewarding in the end, because in 2005, he actually won the Nobel Prize for discovering that this bacteria is the cause of stomach ulcers.
But I ate several pieces and then settled into a movie. After an hour, I felt fine. After a whole night's sleep, I still felt fine. And after 48 hours, I was completely fine. I couldn't believe it, but the therapy seemed to have actually worked.
I can't believe this actually worked. Oh my god. I think he made another video giving us an update. Can't wait to watch that.
I'm gonna get this part out of the way at the front. It has actually worn off at this point, and I'm back to taking lactase pills. But that said, it took a very long time for it to wear off.
Okay.
As I talked about in the original video, this wasn't something that we just made up, and was actually based on a paper which I've linked to down in the description. In the original study, they tested this out on rats, and they studied the rats for about 6 months, and at the end of the study, the rats that they'd used the therapy on were still lactose tolerant. So, did my results match? Actually, yes. At 6 months, I was still very lactose tolerant and could eat heroic levels of dairy products. In fact, it was about 12 months before I started noticing signs of a fade, and another 6 before I had to start taking lactase pills again. So that gives me a grand total of 18 months of lactose tolerance from that single dose of virus.
That's insanely good. So that means one dose lasts 18 months? Can you imagine if a pharmaceutical company bought the patent to this and made a pill like this?
The reality, though, is we always expected it to wear off. Intestinal tissue grows and divides and dies very quickly.
Yep, intestinal tissues have one of the fastest turnovers, and that's why after chemotherapy, a lot of the side effects are nausea and vomiting. Because chemotherapy is targeting the fastest dividing cells in our body, which is the cancer cells, but also cells like our hair follicles. So that's why people lose their hair. And intestinal cells, that's why people get diarrhea or nausea or vomiting.
Even now that it's mostly worn off, the number of lactase pills that I need to get through a meal is minuscule in comparison.
Wow, really?
Originally, before I took the therapy, I had to take 14 or 15 lactase pills just to get through a meal, something simple like a piece of pizza. But now, even 1 or 2 pills is more than sufficient to get me through a meal unless it's absolutely drenched in lactose.
I've never heard anyone having to take 15 Lactaid pills at a time. He's probably the most lactose intolerant person I've seen. Wow, so that was super fascinating. I'm so happy that I got the chance to watch this video. Thanks to everyone that recommended it. If you have any future recommendations, please don't forget to leave that comment down below. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe for more contents like this, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!